Top 5 heavy metal bands that should have been more popular, next on Retro Serial. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Retro Serial. I'm your host, Ian C. I'm glad you could be joining us for this program. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about top 5 heavy metal bands that should have been more popular. And the reason why I kind of put heavy metal in quotes is for a couple of reasons. Number one is I might do episodes later where I talk about top 5 bands that should have been more popular, alternative rock edition or new wave edition or something like that. So today, though, I'm going to be talking about top 5 bands, heavy metal edition, that should have been more popular. And the other reason I put heavy metal kind of in quotes is that there might be some people out there who disagree with me over my definition of heavy metal. You know, some people might say, well, this band is more hard rock, less heavy metal. This band is more, I don't know, whatever you might want to call it. And I'm always open for discussion on how we classify bands. If you're interested, you can leave me a comment in the links below if you have any disagreements with me over whether or not you classify these bands as hard rock as opposed to heavy metal, or glam metal as opposed to heavy metal, or something like that. Generally speaking, I'm talking about bands that I saw on Headbangers Ball. And while I will admit that later on, in later years, there were some bands that came on Headbangers Ball that could not be considered heavy metal, especially when the grunge movement hit. A lot of bands on there just had this umbrella term of heavy metal, whether or not they were glam metal, hair metal, hard rock, whatever. In my opinion, they were all classified as heavy metal or heavy metal adjacent. Again, if you disagree, please leave it in the comment section below. Also, when I say they should have been more popular, I'm not saying about these bands that they weren't popular at all. Some of them were actually really popular, but a lot of these bands didn't raise to the stardom that I just thought they should have. They didn't raise to the stardom of an Iron Maiden or Judas Priest or a Motley Crue or a Rat or a Poison or anything like that. They just didn't raise to that level of popularity, and in my opinion, I think they should have. Before we get to this list, please don't forget to like this and subscribe. Those two things, they really do mean the world to me, and they help the algorithms for YouTube to promote this on other people's pages. So please do those two things for me, like and subscribe. Those are, you know, they don't cost you anything, but they actually mean a lot to us here at the program. The other thing you can do is you can hit the bell notification if you want to know when these things come out, and you can share it on your favorite social media. That means a lot too, because it lets other people know about this program. And finally, if you really want to support us here, you can click the link below to the Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can donate some of your hard-earned cash to see me grow this mogul YouTube empire and make all of my wildest dreams come true. So thank you for all of that. If you take any of those steps, it really means a lot to me. And now let's get to the list. Coming in at number 5 is Accept. Now, Accept's a little bit difficult to define when they began, because they started out as Band X in the late 60s, but by 1976 they were going by the name Accept. Now, they never really had a lot of commercial success, but they were influential on bands that did have a lot of commercial success. Bands like Pantera, Metallica, even Guns N' Roses, all attribute Accept as an influence for them as a band. In 1983, they came out with Balls to the Wall, which was probably their most successful album. It was their most successful album, reaching gold status. It's their only album that actually reached gold status. And when I heard Accept, it was later on. I, wasn't really listening to heavy metal in 1983. I was a young lad back in 1983 and didn't really start listening to heavy metal at all until about 1984, and really started listening to it heavily into the mid and late 80s. And by the time I heard Accept, I didn't know that they were this old band. I thought they were kind of a derivative, a mixture or a hodgepodge between AC/DC because of the vocal quality, and Judas Priest because of some of the guitar quality to them. And at the time, I thought they were just kind of a rip-off band, not knowing that they were around for a really long time. But as I listened to Balls to the Wall, and really I didn't listen to Balls to the Wall until, like 88, somewhere around there. I started listening to that and thinking, man, this is actually really good. I don't know why it's not getting played a lot. I did see them a few times, as I said, on the Headbangers Ball. You stay up past the first hour and a half. You start getting into the third hour of Headbangers Ball, and you start seeing some more bands that aren't so popular come out. And this was one of those bands that I saw on Headbangers Ball during that latter half, that third hour, if you were crazy enough to stay up that late and watch that show. But except a great band, I'm not sure why they just never gained the commercial success that other bands did, especially since they were around right when heavy metal was kind of coming into its own and being defined as its own genre. Coming in at number 4 is Junkyard. Now, if you look Junkyard up, you have to put Junkyard Heavy Metal Band, because there's another band out there called Junkyard, and I absolutely know nothing about them. So this is not a comment on them at all, because I don't know what kind of music they play or anything. But the band I'm talking about was Junkyard. It's a heavy metal band, and it's really part of the glam metal scene. They came out in 1987. They had a self-entitled debut album called The Junkyard, which I thought was really good. Now, I do have to admit that the singer did sound a lot like Motley Crue, a lot like Vince Neil, but who didn't want to sound like Vince Neil? I mean, if you have a recipe for success, why not repeat it? They were a bit more bluesy, however, than Motley Crue was, for sure. They have a real super bluesy, heavy metal, glam metal type of sound. But it was one of those bands that, was being played on Headbangers Ball, as I've already mentioned, or played on MTV during that time. And I went out and I bought the tape, and I just thought it was great. I was just like, wow, this is some really good stuff. Really good, catchy songs. A bit on the glam, well, not a bit on the glam metal side, but certainly on the glam metal side. But as I said before, a little bit more bluesy. Have you even heard of Junkyard? It was in heavy rotation. I played that tape quite a bit as a youngster. So did you hear of it though? I want to know. Let me know if you knew about Junkyard back when it came out. In the comments below, let me know. Coming in at number 3 is DAD, also known as Disneyland After Dark. They were a Danish band that started in the 80s. Now, they were called Disneyland After Dark, but they changed their name to DAD because they didn't want to get sued by Walt Disney, the Walt Disney Incorporation. This was, like I said, a Danish band. They didn't have a lot of commercial success. In 1989, they had some commercial success with their album No Fuel Left for Pilgrims, and the big song that had a video off of that album was Sleeping My Day Away. I don't know if you remember this song at all, or remember that band at all, or remember the album at all, but I was a pretty big fan. I thought it was in the same vein as Guns N' Roses. They had actually kind of a real unique sound, more of a grungy, sleazy sound that you found in a band like Guns N' Roses. And Guns N' Roses is kind of attributed as a band that came in and gave heavy metal a shot in the arm and caused it to live a few years longer than that normally would have, until that alternative rock movement hit. They were kind of in the same vein. I thought that they were a good band. They had not really a glam sound, and they didn't really have kind of a alternative rock sound. They didn't have like a good kind of classic rock heavy metal sound like you would find in somebody like Iron Maiden or something like that. But I thought they just had a really good, solid sound. Tell me what you think about DAD. Is it part of the list of bands that you think should have been more popular? Let me know, as always, in the comments below. Coming in at number 2, and I think you knew that this band would be on the list, is none other than LA Guns. LA Guns started in 1983 and briefly joined with another band called Hollywood Rose to form Guns N' Roses. A brief get-together with that band, but Tracy Guns, the guitarist, left and Guns N' Roses continued to use that name and go on to become what we all know and love today. However, LA Guns also continued to make music and put out albums as well, and they did have some commercial success and a lot of good hits. However, they just never really rose to stardom, but I always thought they should have. I listened to their albums, on tape. I was a tape person myself. I listened to their albums, but I wasn't listening to it on vinyl. I was listening to most of it on tape, but I thought they were a terrific band, and I really was upset that they didn't raise to the fame that Guns N' Roses did. And I'm not saying anything bad about Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses was a great band, but I thought LA Guns was a good band too. And I'm like, how come this band isn't just getting as much airplay as Guns N' Roses is getting? A good band, a great band, again, had some commercial success, but just not the level of Guns N' Roses or even the level of a Rat or Motley Crue or anything like that. So LA Guns coming in at number 1. Can you guess what it is? No, you are not going to be able to guess what it is. I'm going to guess you're not going to be able to guess what it is, but I'm not going to keep you in suspense for too much longer. Just after this phony drum roll, it is Keel. That's my number 1 pick. I know it's not going to be your number 1 pick, but let me just tell you a little bit about the band and why I picked it for this number one position. It was actually formed by Ron Keel, who is the lead singer of the band, and he was the former vocalist for Steeler. And then in 1983-84, he decided to form his own band, Keel. And they put out a few rock albums, but in 1987, they came out with their self-entitled album, Keel. And I got a hold of this album somehow. I couldn't tell you. I got a hold of the tape somehow, and I fell in love with it. I do not know. I mean, every song was good. The production quality was good. The rock quality was good. The guitarist was good. The singer was good. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why this band was not as popular as Motley Crue. Now, they were kind of that LA metal hair band kind of thing. But in 87, that was what was super popular. And in 87, and it was one of those albums too, one of those tapes that I could just listen to the whole thing. You know, a lot of bands, they put out great tapes and they have more than just their hits on there that are excellent. But there are just a few bands out there where I can listen to the whole album without skipping, without going, oh yeah, that's not my favorite one. For me, Keel, that 1987 release, was just as good as anything that was out during that time, and better, in my opinion, than a lot of what was popular. And I couldn't figure out why Keel was not as popular as these other bands. Again, my opinion, but in my opinion, they were just as good. And even better as a lot of these bands that were out during that time. So I know that's going to be a surprise to you as far as a number 1 is concerned. But I don't know what your list would be. If you could list some bands that you thought, especially heavy metal bands for this edition, that you thought were going to be more popular, please leave it in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to like this and subscribe. That's the 2 biggest things. Please help me out by subscribing. I'd be so honored if you'd subscribe to the channel and like this. Share it on your favorite social media. Get the word out about all the good content that we're doing here on this channel. Hit the bell notification if you want to know when these things come out. Also, If you're interested, you can donate your hard-earned cash to see me grow this YouTube mogul empire and help all of my wildest dreams come true by clicking the link below to the Buy Me a Coffee. You can leave a couple bucks there for your friend ENC. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. We will see you again on another episode in the near future. Take care.